Owning a property is an aspiration of most young people. It's the biggest purchase of our lifetimes after all. But with average property prices being many times greater than average earnings, it's now harder to turn that aspiration of property ownership into reality. But that does not mean it's impossible, far, far from it. There is a ton of help out there for first-time buyers to help you on that journey towards getting your own home. Some of which I'll be mentioning today, but I'll also be taking you through a detailed guide on where the property market is heading in the next couple of years. And one of the big outliers we saw back in March and the following months when the effects of the pandemic were really starting to be felt was house prices, with an overall rise of 7.3% to achieve a 6-year high. So firstly, moving into policy, one of the headline announcements here in the UK was the voiding of stamp duty. So the government removed stamp duty on any property under £500,000 for everyone, not just first-time buyers. So at the moment these are the rates on stamp duty, meaning that a person buying a £500,000 home would save £15,000 with the current exemptions, and this will expire on the 31st of March 2021. But with completion times, that being the time from when an offer on a house is accepted to when you're handed the keys, being about 3 to 5 months, you will have sadly missed the boat on this. So for first-time buyers in the future, what does this mean? So from April 2021, we will still get the first £300,000 of the property price stamp duty free as we did before. So in this example here, I'm just using a calculator on the government website. So if we had bought a property for £450,000 with the current rules, we would obviously have paid nothing. But if we were to change the completion date so that it falls into the new rules after the 31st of March from April, and we are again first-time buyers and intending to live in it, we now only get £300,000 rate free, so we'll pay 5% on the remaining £150,000, meaning a cost of £7,500. But you can see why the relief measures introduced really mobilised people into moving, because they saved a heck of a lot of money, especially those that were buying more expensive properties and weren't necessarily first-time buyers, because they got a huge amount of stamp duty relief where they wouldn't normally do so. Because when we see house prices hitting multi-year highs, it's a bit disheartening, but that growth has been heavily skewed by increases in more expensive properties, more so than the lower valued properties that are probably going to be the ones that myself and first-time buyers are looking at. So then moving into incomes. As I said in the introduction, mortgages are obviously a big factor when it comes to buying a house, and banks lend to us on a multiple of our earnings. So if the price to earnings ratio of a house is low, that means houses are more affordable and we can easily obtain a mortgage. If we were to go back to 1995, when the average property price was 3 times the average salary, giving a PE ratio of 3, this would mean that property was relatively cheap in comparison to other time periods, so we would expect to see strong growth in house prices in the following years because it's cheap. So bring it back today when we see house prices are roughly 6 times the average salary, meaning house prices are comparatively more expensive and more unaffordable than other time periods. This is perhaps indicating that it's likely we'll see weak growth in house prices as people just can't afford to move at the moment until earnings catch up or prices come down to balance that PE ratio and make it smaller and closer to the long run average. But with unemployment likely to continue to rise into 2021, it doesn't look like incomes are going to be supporting the high property prices we're currently seeing. It's also useful to look at different areas of the country, and the ONS has this interactive map that shows us not only the disparity of affordability between the north and the south, but also the change in this over time. And we can see the concentration of properties becoming more unaffordable in London and the surrounding areas in the southeast. Alongside incomes, interest rates have also a very big role on the affordability of mortgages, and we're currently seeing the lowest levels ever seen really. Ever since the crisis of 2008, central banks set this low base rate in an attempt to reward households less for saving, so they increase their spending and to encourage lending within the economy to get it moving again. And as mortgage rates are a base rate plus a certain percentage, this means that mortgage rates are also very, very low. And central banks' policies are very closely linked through something called the interest parity conditions. That's why we see the Federal Reserve of the US, the ECB of Europe, and the Bank of England all with very similar low base interest rates. And with Jerome Powell, who's the chairman of the Federal Reserve, says we're not even thinking of raising interest rates at the moment, it's fair to assume that interest rates in the UK are not going to go anywhere time soon. and this will continue to support the property market in the near future. So those were the demand side factors of house prices, and as with all markets, it's a balance between demand and supply. So now we move into the supply side factors, which is simply how many houses are actually being built. And the short answer is not enough. In this Parliament briefing paper from last year, they actually summarised the issue of house building really well. So since the 1970s, there has been an average of 160,000 new homes built, but the consensus is that we need to build upwards of 275,000 each year just to keep up with population growth and tackle the years of undersupply. And that undersupply isn't caused because there's no space or because the country is full. Only around 11% of the land in England has been built on, and the concentration of small players in the house building market has had a detrimental effect on the actual volume we see. And in this graph we can see the supply shifting from local authorities, who were the dominant player in the post-war housing boom in this time period, when Tory and Labour governments committed to similar building targets, but with the new Thatcher government coming into power in 1979 and cut local authority house building, and no government since has revitalised the public house building sector. And we can see ever since the Wilson and Callaghan administrations of the 1970s, we've never once again hit the target of 275,000 new homes each year to keep up with population growth. And it's not in the private sector's interest to increase supply at all. And we can see their output has remained fairly consistent for decades because it's in their interest to restrict supply. Because there's a fairly small number of house builders with a large market share, they're in effect an oligopoly. Yes, if they jacked up their output, they'd be able to better meet demand and even sell more, but we would not be as profitable as demand is more closely aligned with supply, so prices remain constant and don't see the growth that we're currently seeing. The Office for Budget Responsibility, who's the Treasury's independent forecaster, is predicting an 8% fall in prices in 2021, whereas the complete opposite and the most bullish forecast for property listings is the website Rightmove, which expects a rise of 4% in 2021. So what is it? -8 or +4? It doesn't really give us any clues looking at what the forecast is suggesting. But we can see there's just so many factors at play, so it's really difficult to predict anything with much certainty. But with that being said, what do I personally think? I'll probably have to side with what most forecasters are predicting, which is a slow growth rate of about 1%. And that's simply because the government can't allow a substantial drop in property prices during a recovery. People aren't moving, that means they aren't spending money on new furniture, carpets, decor, and everything else that comes with buying a house. So a slowdown in the property market means a slowdown in the wider economy as well. And we also have something called the wealth effect. So when property prices are high and they're rising, homeowners are seeing this and they're feeling rich. So with that in mind, they're more likely to spend more of their incomes rather than save it. This is why the government wants to increase home ownership, especially among first-time buyers. They aren't doing it to be nice to us personally, they're doing it because it benefits all of us through a better economy, which is why they've started to introduce things like Help to Buy equity loans and lifetime ISAs, especially for first-time buyers, which I talk about in this video, so I recommend going and checking that one out next, as it gives an overview of how you can benefit from that best. So see you in the next video.